Howdy folks.
Welcome back to Do Brew.
This video is a special Patreon only video that I intend to do for all of my projects that require a little bit more in-depth detail regarding some of the measurements of the components that go into a project. So in this quick video, I'm going to give you a summary of every piece and part that goes into making the mini mudroom project. I'll also provide you a quick listing of the more specialized tools that are required. I'm not going to talk about a hammer or a pry bar or a screwdriver, but I will talk about some of the tools that I use that make the job go a little bit more quickly and easier. But before that, let me just say a huge thanks to all of you that support Do Brew through Patreon. Whether you support at the $1 level, the $10 level, or anywhere in between, it is hugely appreciated. So thank you all very much. Okay.
Thank you very much.
So as I said, this is going to be a quick summary of all of the components and the measurements that go into building the mini mudroom. Of course, as I always say, if you decide to build your own mini mudroom and you have any questions whatsoever, please feel free to contact me through Patreon, through YouTube, or at doandbrew@gmail.com. I really do mean it, that I'm here to help you get your project done, so don't hesitate to ask any questions. But life's complicated enough, and I didn't want to make this project any more difficult for me than it would be, and it's not that hard of a project to complete. But with that said, all of the wood, all of the hooks, the wainscoting, and all the finishing materials are all locally available. I purchased everything you see here at my local Home Depot. Now, as you saw in the build videos, there is some stud lumber underneath the finished product, but the majority of this project is done with solid wood. Of course, then there's the wainscoting, and I do use plywood for the shelving and for the bench. Now, I'm going to go through the measurements pretty quickly. Of course, you can pause or rewind if you need to take more time. First off, the height of the bench from the floor works out to be 20¼ inches. Now that's just what I chose, and I just took a measurement off of a chair close by and came up with 20¼ inches. Now the overall width is 49½, 49¾ That's not design, that's just the space I had to build out in. Okay, next up are the stiles, the vertical pieces that run between the shelves, and I probably had my saw set to 3 inches, but it looks like it's more like 3 1/16. Okay, next up is the height of the seat from the top of the lower shelf and to the bottom of the seat facing, if you will. It's about 12 1/8 up to 14 inches. Okay, next up I'll clear some shoes away and we'll get a measurement of the overall depth of our lower shelf or cubby, and that works out to 15 and a little over 5/8. I was probably shooting for 5/8, 15 and 5/8, but a little over. And again, our facing on our bench seat is right at about 2 inches. The overall depth of our bench works out to be about 15 1/8, and then the rail that runs across the bottom of the wainscoting, the top of the bench, to be 4 3/4, and the molding I picked to run along the top of the bench where it meets the wainscoting is 1 3/4 inches, and that was just a nice molding I picked out at the store. You could use anything that you think looks nice. Next up, we're going to measure the stiles, the vertical pieces that run on the wainscoting, and they are all a standard 3½ inches. The interior, the middle wainscoting field, works out to 13½ inches, while the wainscoting fields to the right and left of the center field work out to 9½ inches. And again, just illustrating here that the vertical stiles are 3½ inches, and that's on both sides of the corner, 3½ inches. So of course, one of these pieces that you cut need to be cut at 4 1/4 so that it can tuck behind the other one and have that standard 3.5 inch reveal. Now, just a quick measurement here to show you where the hooks are aligned, and I just tried to center them in between. Worked out real nice at 4 3/4 for the hook on the right, and then 9 3/4 for the hook on the left, and they're down 4.5 inches. That's kind of where the center screw is, 4.5. Now I chose these hooks because they screw directly in. I wanted that security. And then from the upper shelf, the middle shelf down right at 6 inches. That's from the middle shelf, the middle cubby area, 6 inches. Now this is from the front casing back, a large wainscoting field working out to be 19 5/8 inches. Now overall, had a request for this measurement from the floor up to the top of the wainscoting is just about exactly 60 inches. Now down from the middle shelf, and then right about 6 3/4 inches. Next up is our middle shelf spacing. And this is all predicated on those stiles below where the corbels are. Of course, the corbels are centered on the stiles, and then the shelf dividers there for the middle shelf are centered on the corbels. Now the corbels themselves work out to 1 3/4 inches, and then I'm just showing you the spacing again, which is determined by those stiles below. I want to take a quick moment to point out that the middle shelf dividers here are made out of solid wood, not plywood. I chose solid wood because plywood would have that bitter edge when you cut it. The left and right cubbies are right at 15 inches, while the middle cubby is a little bit wider at about 16 5/8. Now from the top of the top shelf down to the lower edge of the lower shelf, right at 10 inches. Just wanted to provide that as a reference for you. And our middle shelf worked out to be right at 10 7/8. But of course, however deep you need it to be, you want it to be, or what you're constrained to. And then the upper shelf worked out to be 16 3/8. Again, you have some flexibility there on how deep your shelf is. Now, the height of the interior shelf, of course, right there at 8 3/8. Now, for some measurements here regarding the top area, the top shelf. From the ceiling, we have 8-foot ceilings in our house, and they come down to 21 1/4 inches. Again, somebody asked me for this measurement from the top of the top shelf to the top of the wainscoting, 15 3/4 inches. Measurement from the ceiling down to the top of the wainscoting coming in right at 37 3/8. Okay, now we're going to look at the trim and molding work outside of your mini mudroom, and the casings are all a standard 5 1/4. This one's looking a little bit more like 5 3/16. Now moving up to the top, the entablature, sometimes called the head casing. That large area there, that large facing board is called the frieze, and that's just a standard 5 1/2 inches, and that's 3/4 inch wood. The top is made out of, again, 5/4 wood cut to 3 1/2 inches, and this actually looks like it's more 1 1/8 inches. So I got a little bit below that top board, which forms the remainder of the cornice. That's actually a crown molding. It's a very small crown molding at 1.5 inches, and then a bead board at 3/8 of an inch. Okay, and that comes with a nice rounded edge. Now, don't be intimidated by the entablature. You know, as you can see, it's only 4 pieces of wood, but boy, it really makes your project pop. As you may know, I've got multiple videos on building out window casings, door surrounds, so on and so forth. Now, the corbels themselves, they're 9 1/2 by 9 1/2, and as I showed you previously, they work out to 1 3/4 inches, and those are just bought flat off the shelf at my local Home Depot. Now I call them trim work, but they do serve a function supporting the middle of the middle shelf and of course the upper shelf above that. Okay, and that completes all the measurements for the mini mudroom project. Next up, let's go over a couple of the more specialized tools that I use. Of course, you see me using a pneumatic nailer quite often. I highly recommend getting this, especially if you're going to be doing it completely by yourself or even with one other person. Not terribly expensive. Here's one at Home Depot for $199, and that's a complete kit with 3 nailers. Next up, a router. You do need this for rounding over some edges. Again, not terribly expensive, $100 to $158. And all of the products here are right off of Home Depot's website. Random orbit sander. Of course, you got to have this if you want to have a nice finish and you're either going to paint or stain your mini mudroom. Again, available at Home Depot for $60 to $80 and then on up from that. Now, here's a free tool. This is my spacing tool, and as you see in a number of Craftsman style surround videos, I like to have a nice 1/8 inch reveal where wood meets wood. So that's an easy block you can make on your own. A table saw. This is a contractor table saw that you can purchase at Home Depot for not a ton of money. I think I actually put some Milwaukee brands down. I've kind of switched over lately from DeWalt to Milwaukee, but if you need to rip some wood down to a specific dimension, a table saw is recommended. Next up is a miter saw. Highly recommend getting this. That allows you to make really precise cuts. Any angles really between 90 degrees and 45 degrees. Here are some battery powered Milwaukee saws that are every bit as powerful and less expensive than that DeWalt miter saw you saw me using. Okay, next up, some materials that you're going to need. Now, I'm not going to cover things like nails and wood screws, but just about everything else, like liquid nails. Anytime you're gluing anything to a painted surface, use liquid nails. For any wood to wood gluing, Titebond is recommended. For filling all those nail holes, use the Dry Deck spackling. Goes on pink, dries white. This is the best primer I've ever used. And along with the Sherwin-Williams top coat. You put a lot of time into your project, don't skimp on the paint. Put a good quality paint on there because this is an area that's going to get a little bit dirty. There's going to be dirt and mud brought in on your shoes, maybe a little bit of dirt on your hands from taking off those muddy shoes. You need the scrubbability. Okay, and continuing on with the building materials, here are the corbels, the ones I used in the mini mudroom. Of course, there are thousands of different designs of corbels. This is available at Home Depot for pretty modest cost. And then here's the 5/4 board that I use for the facing on the shelving, the bench, and also for the top of the cornice or the entablature. 5/4 board, of course, is finished to 1 inch in thickness. The majority of all of the other solid wood is the 1 inch, which of course is 3/4 inches thick. That's used throughout the rest of the project, with the exception of the beadboard. The beadboard, which I use for the wainscoting, also available at Home Depot, sells for about 20 bucks for a 4x8 sheet, and I use 2 for this project. And lastly are the hooks. Now, they don't sell the exact hook that I bought at Home Depot anymore, but this is the closest that I could find. And again, you notice it has the screws on the side. That's so much more secure than the other way to mount a hook, which is to put the mounting plate on the wall and then put the hook on with a little teeny tiny set screw that you tighten with an Allen wrench. Those things always seem to fall off. And so for hanging heavy coats and winter gear, this is a much more secure way. Well, that's it, folks. That's the rundown of all the pieces and parts that go into making this mini mudroom. And let me tell you, it's quite an improvement over the old beat-up closet we had, and we use the heck out of it for hanging up coats, as well as sitting down to get your shoes on and off, as well as storing winter hats and gloves and scarves and things that you never can seem to keep up with from year to year. If you have any questions about your mini mudroom project, anything in this video, any more design questions, please fire them off to me. I am really here to help you out. I want you to be able to complete your mini mudroom project just as successfully as I knocked out mine. One more time, thanks again for your loyal support to Do Brew, both through Patreon and your regular viewership on the channel. Good luck on your project, folks. Take care.